Oh, hey there. Welcome back into another World Cup previews. Folks, it's a double header today as it is Groups I and J. Group I is as close to a group of death as you are going to get. You have France, of course, have gone to back-to-back World Cup finals. They won in 2018, lost in 2022. You have the technically defending African champions in Senegal. You have Iraq, and you have Norway returning to the tournament for the first time since 1998, where, I don't know if you know that guy, will be making his first appearance at a World Cup. And then in Group J, you do have the defending champions in Argentina. You have Algeria returning back to the international stage on this grand stage. You have Austria, and you have Jordan coming on to the World Cup stage for the first time ever. So let's get into that group of death. Let's get into the defending champions group. We've got so much to cover here, so let's get after it. Welcome back to the Nick Bird Sports Network for another World Cup preview. Groups I and J today. Very exciting times. I cannot wait to get into Group I because it is a absolutely stacked group. So I'm not even going to ramble on anymore. We're just going to get straight into Group I here. Of course, you have France, the two-time champions in 1998 and 2018. Of course, they made it to the final back in Qatar in 2022 where they lost to Argentina. You have Senegal, who come into this tournament as defending AFCON champions on the field. In the courts, they are not, as it was declared a walkover, and Morocco won the title. You have Iraq coming into this tournament for the first time, I believe, since 1982. It is only their second appearance, and you have Norway returning to the World Cup for the first time in nearly 30 years. As the last time they were on this stage was 1998. So let's get into it here. France, of course, coming out of UEFA, 17th appearance here at the World Cup. It's an interesting schedule for them because everybody's looking towards that game on June 26th when they will face Norway in the final group stage game. But I'm more looking at that first game against Senegal. That is a very intriguing game to me. I think a lot of people might be underestimating Senegal a bit here. I think Senegal are going to play well, but this isn't about Senegal. France, they have the number one FIFA ranking for a reason, and we will be getting to this in a moment. This is a absolutely stacked team. Of course, I don't want to forget that game in the middle there where they will be facing off against Iraq in Philadelphia on June 22nd. Now let's get into this stacked team. Your goalkeepers, Bryce Samba, Mike Madigan, Robin Risser. Your defenders are Malo Gusto, Lucas Digne, Dayo Upamecano, Jules Koundé, Ibrahim Conte, William Saliba, Theo Hernandez, Lucas Hernandez, and Maxime Lacroix. Midfielders are Manu Kone, Aurelien Tchouameni, N'Golo Kante, Adrien Rabiot, Warren Zaire-Emery, Ryan Cherki, Magnus Akuchi, and your forwards are going to be Ousmane Dembélé, Marcus Thuram, of course, Kylian Mbappé, Michael Olise, Bradley Barcola, Desiree Doué, and Jean-Philippe Mateta. Didier Deschamps, in what is going to be his final World Cup, he is stepping down once this World Cup is over, and of course, France's favorite son, Zinedine Zidane, will be taking the role as head coach of the France Football Federation after this World Cup. I believe that deal has been done for years, it feels like. But Didier Deschamps gets one final dance. It's not often you see a manager go to 3 straight World Cups with the same team. Will that be an advantage for this French team? I'm not 100% sure, but let's take a look at this 4-2-3-1. Mike Madigan will get the start in that. Luca Digne on the left. Upamecano and Saliba will be your two center backs, and Koundé will be on the right. Your defensive midfield will be Rabiot and Tchouaméni. Not many defensive midfields can line up to that. Marcus Thuram, Michael Olise, and Ousmane Dembélé will be your midfield three. And of course, on top is Kylian Mbappé. Now, this is quite a interesting team because, of course, you look at this. This is a just incredible side. And that's not even talking about what they have on the bench, because what they have on the bench is just absolutely incredible. You look at some of the youth like Bradley Barcola, Desiree Doué. Those are two massive names that just aren't even getting the starting lineup here. You look at somebody like Jean-Philippe Mateta, who, he's kind of at the midway point in his career, and he's finally getting that call up. He's kind of getting it constantly now, and he has made this World Cup squad. That's absolutely amazing. You look at N'Golo Kante, somebody who has been there for these past two World Cups. That's a good veteran piece on the bench. And then you look at like Theo and Lucas Hernandez. Those are, again, two very good defensive, balanced, experienced players. And that's what I like about this French team, is it's a very nice balance of players who have been there in 2018 and 2022. And then a few players thrown in there. They're brand new on this stage, but there's enough leaders around them. And that's what makes me confident kind of in this French team. There's a reason they are the favorites with the Spaniards. The heat is going to be a question, I think. I know everybody has to play in the heat, and I get it. I think we do read a little bit too much into that, but you always have to question it, especially with these European teams. How are they going to show up in tournaments like this? Because you cannot simulate the types of weather conditions you will be facing off against in, Boston or New York or Philadelphia. I know they kind of got the better of the draw. They're not going to the South. They're not playing in a Miami. They're not playing in a Mexico City. But how are teams going to handle that? That is going to be very interesting. And I think this French team is one of the best examples of that, of how are they going to adapt their game to that. So with that, we'll move on. We'll move on to Senegal here in their fourth appearance in the World Cup. They're looking to best that quarterfinal appearance in 2002, which was their first appearance at the World Cup. You look at their schedule, they get the two most difficult games out of the way first, which could be a bad thing, because obviously if you don't get points in either of those two, that last game against Iraq becomes a must-win. Now, of course, Iraq will be in the same situation. They will just be playing the same teams except opposite days. How are those two going to play that out? Because very much so, this is the group of death, in as close as you're going to be able to get it to in a 48-team tournament. So with Senegal, they open up against France on June 16th. June 22nd, they will stay in New Jersey and face off against Norway. They close out. They'll go north of the border to Toronto to take on Iraq in that final game of the Group I stage. Let's take a look at the players that have been called up for Senegal. There is not a lot of difference in this lineup from what took the field in the African Cup of Nations final. Yvan Diouf, Eduardo Mendy, and Mori Diaw are your goalkeepers. Your defenders are Mamadou Sarr, Kalidou Koulibaly, Abdoulaye Seck, Ismail Jacobs, Crepin Diatta, Moussa Nikite, Antoine Mendy, and El Hadji Malik Diouf. Your midfielders are going to be Idrissa Gueye, Pante Ciss, Lamine Shama, Pape Matar Sarr, Habib Diarra, Baras Paco Ndai, Papa Gueye, and your forwards are going to be Assane Diao, Bombay Deng, Sadio Mané, Nicholas Jackson, Sharif Ndai, Iliman Ndai, Ismail Assar, and Ibrahim Maye. Now it's going to be a 4-3-3 for Papa Bona Thial. Of course, the African Cup of Nations winning manager. For Senegal, this is kind of almost exactly what they lined up with in that final. There are a few tweaks there, but this is what I will be expecting to see come those first two games in the Meadowlands. Will it change once they get to Toronto? Who knows? But I believe this is their strongest starting 11 with Eduardo Mendy in net, Diouf, Nikite, Koulibaly, and Diatta as your 4 defenders, Papagüe, Papsar, and Diarra as your midfield 3, and then Sadio Mané, Nicholas Jackson, and Ismaila Sarr will close out that forward 3. Now with Senegal, everybody talks about dark horses, and the X, Y, and Z team is going to be a dark horse because this and that. And one of the main dark horses in this tournament is in this group, and we will get into it. And I do like their chances. I don't think they're the dark horse, though. I do believe Senegal may be a dark horse here. They have a very, very good team. I know African Cup of Nations and World Cup, 2 very different things. But what I saw in the African Cup of Nations, I was impressed by. I know the final got messy with the protest and them walking off the field, walking back on, winning the game in extra time, and then having it taken away in the courts like 3 to 4 months later. What happens in the court doesn't matter. It's the play on the field, and I liked what I saw from Senegal. Now, is that going to translate to a World Cup? I have no idea. But if there is one team I think that is most prepared for the type of weather they're going to face in this tournament, especially in these 3 group stage games, I think it's going to be Senegal. I obviously worry about France. Norway is the one I worry the biggest about. Iraq is probably up there with Senegal being able to handle these conditions. But I like this Senegal team, especially if Papsar is firing on all cylinders. He's going to be a massive, massive part of that midfield. We've seen Eduardo Mendy make tremendous saves. We know he is a bona fide, outstanding goalkeeper. This is the team I'm kind of most excited to see in this group. I know the big names are obviously exciting to see, but the team that might surprise a lot of people is this Senegal team. I'm looking forward to see if they actually live up to the hype I'm building them up to here. So we'll move on here. We'll move on to Iraq, who make it back to the World Cup for the first time since 1986. Coincidentally, the last time the tournament was hosted by Mexico. Now, they won't be playing any games in Mexico, but they did have to win games in Mexico to get here, as they had to go through the Intercontinental Playoff, our first of 2 teams to make it through that path. And if you take a look at that path, they had to, I believe, defeat the United Arab Emirates in the AFC playoff, if I'm not mistaken, over 2 legs. And then they got an auto bid to the final of the Intercontinental Playoffs, where they defeated Bolivia 2-1. So this is your first of 2 playoff teams. You look at their schedule, they'll open up against Norway in Boston. June 22nd, they'll face off against France in Philadelphia, and then they do close that June 26th against Senegal in Toronto, a game that could be absolutely massive for both sides if they want to advance on in this tournament. We'll take a look at the squad that is being brought here for Iraq. Faed Talib, Jalal Hassan, and Ahmed Bazdil are your goalkeepers. Rebin Sulka, Hussein Ali, Zaid Tashin, Akim Halishim, Manaf Yunis, Ahmed Yaha, Murshas Doski, Mustafa Sadoun, and Franz Puto are your defenders. Your midfielders are going to be Youssef Amain, Ibrahim Bayesh, Zidane Iqbal, Amir Al-Amari, Kevin Yacoub, Amir Sher, and Zaid Ismail. And your forwards are going to be Ali Al-Hamid, Mo Nan Ali, Ahmed Qassam, Ali Youssef, Ali Jamin, Ayman Hussein, and Marco Farji. Take a look at the projected 4-4-2 from head coach Graham Arnold. You'll have Hassan starting in net. He is going to be your captain of this Iraqi team at this tournament. Doski, Hasim, Tashin, and Hussein Ali will be your back four here. You look at your midfield four, you'll be Jazim, Al Omari, Iqbal, and Ayman as those four. Your two attacking options will be Monanid, Ali, and Hussein. Now, with this Iraq team, like a few other teams in this tournament, I'm not going to pretend like I know everything and anything about this team. I basically kind of watched highlights to kind of get an idea of what kind of formation they play here. And past that, I can't really tell you much. I did watch that playoff final when they beat Bolivia. It was a very intriguing game to watch because that Bolivia team has kind of been working their way up to system. Their focus is more on 2030, if we're honest here, in getting to a World Cup. In 2030 was the target, so obviously they were a little bit ahead here getting to a playoff final. But this Iraqi team, I'm not sure what to expect from them because I don't know a lot about them. And I'm not going to pretend like I know everything about them. I basically know they're going to play 4-4-2. And they're going to play it through Hussein and Monanid. Ali is your front two. Those are going to be your main goal-scoring targets. And I'm going to be interested to see how they play just because I haven't got a lot of experience with this Iraqi national team. So we'll move on to the final team in Group I. And of course, that is Norway, returning to the World Cup for the first time since 1998. They're looking to, of course, make it out of the group stage just like they did in 1998. Hopefully they can maybe get past that round of 16. This is a very intriguing team because this is a team on the rise. A lot of people have them as dark horses. I personally would have had them as dark horses if everybody wasn't on them. I know a lot of people are on them, mostly because of Haaland, but this is a very, very good squad that, like, I don't think people recognize. Like, they rolled through qualifying. Like, they did not struggle. They topped a group with Italy in it. I know that doesn't mean much these days, but the rest of the group wasn't outstanding. They beat Moldova 5-0 and 11-1. They beat Israel 5-0 and 4-2. You look at their games against Italy, they won 3-0 and 4-1. And you look at their games against Estonia, and they won 4-1 and 1-0. They went 8-0-0 in qualifying. 37 goals, 5 conceded. It's just kind of unheard of. I get it wasn't the best of groups, but this is going to be a dominant force if they are firing on all cylinders. And I think it's very helpful for them that they do start off against a team like Iraq. Kind of gets your feet wet. You're not facing, your toughest challenge in the group in the first game. That is huge. Senegal will be their first big test. I think that's like the first true good team they'll play. And then, of course, that game on June 26th against France. I know everybody's looking forward to that one. Mbappé, Haaland, of course, everybody is going to be excited for that one. So let's take a look at the goalkeepers here. Orjan Nyland, Sander Tavik, Egil Selvek are going to be your goalkeepers. Your defenders are going to be Christoph Ajar, Leo Østgaard, David Møller-Wolf, Fredrik Andre Borken, Marcus Holmgren Pedersen, Trollborn Hegum, Sondre Longos, and Hendrik Faulkner. Your midfielders are going to be Morten Tormsby, Patrick Berg, Sander Berg, Martin Ødegaard, Fredrik Arnus, Christian Torsvelt, Theo Asgard, André Shekrop, Oscar Bob, and Jans Peter Haag. Your forwards are going to be Alexander Sorloth, Erling Haaland, Jorgen Strand Larsen, Antonio Nusa, and Julian Ryerson close out that 26-man squad being brought in by Ståle Stolbakken, the manager for Norway. Going to set up in a 4-3-3 here. All-Star Island is getting the start in that. He's had a very good season at Sevilla. I'm expecting more from him this tournament. Muller, Wolf, Hegem, Eiger, and Pedersen will be your back four here. Arundis, Sanderberg, and Martin Ødegaard are going to be your midfield three. Of course, Ødegaard wearing the captain's armband. Antonio Nusa on the left. Schorloff on the right. And, of course, right down the middle, Erling Haaland. I think this is going to be an absolutely incredible watch. Now, everybody's looking at that starting 11. What they're not looking at, though, is that bench. That is kind of shockingly good, if I can say. Like, for a country like Norway, you don't usually have depth like that, which shows they've been building in the correct way. Like I said, I want this to be my dark horse. I physically cannot take them to be a dark horse, though, since everybody else is taking them. That is just strictly my rules. I got burned on Turkey in Euro 2020. Said I'll never do it again. And here I am. I'm not doing it again. But I do love this Norway team. I don't think they'll top the group, obviously. But second place is very, very achievable. Kind of all comes down to how that Senegal game is played. And that's very interesting that the battle between 1 and 2 obviously is going to technically be your biggest game in this group. But truly, the biggest game for positioning, I think, is that Norway-Senegal game. Because that could determine if you are going into the round of 32 as a third-place team, or if you're going in as, you are solidly in, you finish second in the group, you may get a little bit of an easier draw, and who knows? At that point, you're playing with house money. So I really like this Norway team, but I know there are still going to be questions around them since they haven't made a Euro in this time frame. This is their first major tournament basically since, I believe, 1998. I don't remember if they made the Euro after that. I could be wrong there. I'm, again, setting myself up to be wrong there. But this is a very, very good Norway team. So with that, that means Group I is in the books for the previews, of course. I kind of got into a little bit already there, early predictions. France is the number one team in the FIFA rankings for a reason. They are going to be there, and you can't stop them. They will finish first in this group. Second comes down to that Norway-Senegal game. I'm very excited for that one, which of course means that Iraq, as of now, probably finishes fourth, which, you're on the big stage for the first time in 40 years. You obviously want to come out and give a good performance. I just think they got drawn in the worst group they possibly could have. So we'll see, though. Full predictions obviously coming early next week, and we'll get into more of that when we get there. So with that, we'll move on. We'll move on to Group J, which, of course, has the defending champions, Argentina. You look at their opponents in this group, it will be Algeria out of Africa. You have Australia, and you have Jordan. Of course, you look at this, and you may say this is not the most appeasing group on paper, but you got to look into it more deeply than that, because these teams outside of probably Norway, I think are all quite good. I think we all know who's going to win the group. It's that battle for second. And who knows, maybe Jordan sneaks in there, because I'll get into it. I haven't seen a lot of Jordan football. So it's as simple as that. I feel like second place is wide open in this group. It really could fall to any of those three. We'll look first at the defending champions, the three-time champions, sitting third in the FIFA rankings in their 19th World Cup appearance, and that is Argentina. what can we say? Lionel Messi, last dance. I know we said that in 22, but I don't even know if he expected to still be playing at this level 4 years later. But he's here. And he's got a squad around him that is very similar to the team that won 4 years ago. And it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out, because up until the tournament 4 years ago, it was always about the defending champions curse and how they never made it out of the group stage. Well, France kind of just threw that in the garbage, and they just, made a simple run to the final where they could have easily gone back-to-back. They had multiple opportunities in that game where they could have won it. They obviously did not. But has that mold finally been broken and the defending champions curse is gone? We'll have to see. They open up June 16th against Algeria in Kansas City. Now, if we remember back to 22, Argentina did lose their first game, and they then went on and did not lose another game that tournament. Can Algeria play spoiler here? That is a massive question. You move on to June 22nd. They will play against Austria in Dallas. And at the same venue in Dallas, they will close out the group on June 27th against Jordan. Now, I believe we talked about this with Group E in the Ivory Coast and how they were playing Curacao in the last game and how that is probably a massive advantage for them. This is obvious. Argentina should be glad they're playing Jordan in that last game for a little bit of different reasons. They may have this group already locked up by that point. You can potentially rest players like Messi. I know resting players isn't like a huge thing, especially in the World Cup, especially in the group stage. But you do look at that and, Messi's up there in age. If you can get him rest anywhere you can, that would be that game if they take care of business against Algeria and Austria. The schedule, obviously, it's everything past the group stage for Argentina. Their real tournament probably starts in the round of 32, and who knows, depending on who they play in that round of 32, it may not even start until the round of 16. But this is a team that should and could make a massive long run at this tournament this year. We'll take a look at the squad that is being brought in by Lionel Scaloni, the World Cup winning manager. You take a look at his goalkeepers: Juan Musso, Gian Murillo, Rulli, and Emiliano Martinez. You take a look at the defenders: Leandro Baldelli, Nicolas Tagliafico, Gonzalo Monti, Listerano Martinez, Christian Romero, Nicolas Otamendi, Franco Medina, and Nathuo Molina. Their midfielders: Leandro Perez, Rodrigo De Paul, Valentin Barco, Giovanni Lo Celso, Esquiel Pancolios, Nicolas Gonzalez, Alexis McAllister, and Enzo Fernandez. Your forwards are Julian Alvarez, Lionel Messi, Thiago Almada, Gianno Simeone, Nico Paz, Jose Manuel Lopez, and Lautaro Martinez closes out the 26-man squad for Argentina. Let's take a look at a projected 4-4-2 here. Emi Martinez, of course, gets the start in net. Nobody else would be starting in net unless Emi Martinez was injured at this World Cup. Nicolas Tagliafico, Otamendi, Christian Romero, and Molina will be your back four. You look at that midfield of Almada, McAllister, Fernandez, De Paul. That is up there with the best midfields at this tournament. That is just brand name after brand name after brand name after brand name. Those are four very, very good, potentially world-class players there. And, of course, your two strikers are going to be Lionel Messi and Julian Alvarez. That is possibly the top of the top right there with that two-striker system. So with this Argentinian team, of course, the question is going to be, can they defend the title? Do they have the team to defend the title? Yes, they do. The simple answer is yes. Of course they do. They very much have the players to do this. If Lionel Messi is playing, they have the players to do this. You look at Julian Alvarez. That is going to be a massive, massive player for Argentina at this tournament. Rodrigo de Paul, Emi Martinez, of course, Christian Romero. That's going to be a big question there. He hasn't played since March with an injury. How is his health going to be coming into this tournament? But then you look at players on their bench like Nico Paz, who's a player I am very excited to see at this tournament. He's kind of been lighting it on fire there at Como in Italy. How is that going to translate onto the international stage, on the biggest international stage? And if Argentina just play their game, they'll be a semifinalist at worst. And I don't think that's bad. But it's when things go wrong that's going to be the question. This is a team that hasn't had a lot of things go wrong these past few years. This is a team that just kind of keeps rolling. Can they keep it rolling at this World Cup? Certainly helps that it's in the Americas and the European teams struggle, and especially this group. It is not the greatest of groups. We'll move on, though, to Algeria. Coming out of Africa, 5th World Cup appearance. They're looking to best that round of 16 result in 2014. Of course, they open up the tournament against Argentina. They will then travel to San Francisco to take on Jordan. That is one of the longer road trips here, if you want to call it a road trip. And then they close out June 27th against Austria in Kansas City. Now, that Austria game has a lot of history behind it. Of course, the disgrace of Giron between Austria and West Germany at the time colluded to keep Algeria out of the knockout stages at that World Cup in 1982. Chance for revenge there. I know that was, 44 years ago, but it's still a talking point. I know it was a little bit recent, but the Ghanaians never, with Uruguay, they never forgave them. They never forgot. That was a big talking point at the last World Cup. I know that was closer, but still, Algeria, Austria, storylines there could be endless. Let's take a look at the squad that is being brought in for Algeria here. Melvin Mastil, Ousmane Dembélé, and Luka Dezan. And you may say, did you say that correctly? Luka Zidane. And yes, I did, because that is indeed Zinedine Zidane's son, who will be the starting goalkeeper here for Algeria at this World Cup. So Zidane is back on the international stage, the biggest international stage for the first time since 2006, when Zidane walked off the field for a final time after a red card in the final against Italy. You look at the defenders: Azala Madine, Ashraf Abda, Mohamed Amin Tungai, Zinedine Belad, Jeroen Hadin, Ryan El Nouri, Rafa Belgali, Rami Benzbani, and Samir Shaghuli. Your midfielders are going to be Ramirez Zagouli, Hossam Oswar, Faraz Shabai, Hikram Bouadai, Nabil Benlab, Ibrahim Madazda, Yakin Trigori. Your forwards are going to be Riyad Mahrez, Ahmed Gouri, Ans Haji Musa, Nadir Benzbouai, Mohamed Amora, Adil Bounabia, and Faiz Jamez. Let's take a look at this projected 4-2-3-1 from Vladimir Petrovic, the Swede that will be managing Algeria here at the World Cup. Like I mentioned, Zidane in net for Algeria. At Noit, Benzemain, Mandi, and Bengali are your four defenders. Your defensive midfielders are Owar and Bououi. You look at your attacking midfielders: Amora, Maza, and Mahrez. And then your single striker here in this 4-2-3-1 is Gorori. Now, Algeria, I will again kind of plead here. I don't know much about them. I saw a few games at the African Cup of Nations for them. And by a few games, I mean like one or two. I don't know what to expect from them here. I like that Zidane's son is the goalkeeper. That is just absolutely incredible that we have a Zidane back on the international stage. Of course, his father will most likely be at World Cup 2030, manager of France, but to have one playing that is pretty cool. Of course, Riyad Mahrez, probably his final World Cup. He is starting to get to that point where you always question, is this World Cup his last? He is at that point. So there are storylines here with this team. Very interesting to see how they play this World Cup out because, like I mentioned, second place is wide open here, and this could be a perfect spot for them to advance on here. We will then move on to Austria, your team out of UEFA in this group. Their 8th World Cup appearance. They are still chasing that high of the third place finish in 1954. It's going to be tough for them to get that this tournament. We will be completely honest here. They start off June 16th against Jordan in San Francisco. They will then travel to Dallas to take on Argentina on June 22nd. And June 27th, they will finish up in Kansas City against Algeria. Now, Ralf Rangnick has named a 25-man squad as there were injuries that took place in the lead up to this World Cup, and he just has decided against calling up a replacement. That injury was Christoph Baumgartner, who withdrew on June 2nd, and there is going to be no replacement. So we will take a look at this 25-man squad. Alexander Schlanger, Florian Weigl, and Patrick Pence are your goalkeepers. Your defenders are going to be David Affenbarger, Kevin Danzo, Stefan Poch, David Alaba, Philippe Leinert, Philippe Moan, Marco Friedel, and Michael Sobotka. Your midfielders are going to be Xavier Schlager, Nicholas Seiwald, Marcellus Sabitzer, Florian Grilskic, Karni Chuamenka, Romando Schmid, Konrad Lemir, Alexander Pross, Paul Warner, and Alessandro Schlopf. Your forwards are going to be Marko Antrovic, Mikhail Gregorstich, Sasha Kalizic, and Patrick Wimmer. Now, Ralf Rangnick, of course, this 25-man squad will be playing in a 4-2-3-1. Schlager gets the start in net. Menwi gets the left back position. David Alaba and Kevin Danzo will be your two center backs here, and Lamir will be your right back. Schlager and Seiwald will be your defensive midfielders. Your attacking midfielders will be Marcel Savitzer, Wimmer, and of course Chuamenda, with Anro Trovic being your main striker here. I do find it interesting that Ralf Rangnick has decided against calling somebody up for Baumgartner here at the World Cup. It always seems like you want to have as many players as possible at a World Cup, so if you can bring 26, you're going to bring 26. I find it interesting that he hasn't called anybody up just, in case injuries happen. It's as simple as that. So I'm a little surprised that he didn't get called up, or anybody get called up. This team, though, second place wide open. It feels like they have the advantage here. I think they have the best team of any of the rest of them. Obviously, the game against Argentina going to be the biggest struggle here. How do they figure that out? That's going to be interesting to see tactically, because the only team that is matching up with Argentina in this group is Austria. But even then, Austria is not really matching up well to that Australia team. We'll move on to our final team of the group, and that is Jordan, coming out of Asia, making their first World Cup appearance. This is, of course, a massive achievement for their nation. I don't really know if they've ever truly been close, I guess I would say, to qualifying for a World Cup. But they've kind of been building up to this. I know they finished runners-up in the Asian Cup in 2023. They finished runners-up in the Arab Cup in 2025, which I believe that was the last one held, if I'm not mistaken. And then I believe the Asian Cup is also the last one that has happened. So they've made it to the finals of the past two cups they've played in. They finally get their chance on the international stage. The question is, how is that going to go? I'm not very confident it's going to go well, to be honest. But also, I'll be honest, I don't know much about this team either, so it's going to be a learning process as we go. Take a look at the squad called up here. Now, I will mention there have only been 25 players called up to the squad right now because Ibrahim Sabra withdrew with injury just a day ago as we record. A replacement has not been named by manager Jamal Salemi, so there could potentially be a 26-man here. He has not ruled it out like Ralph Ragnick has. But let's take a look. Your goalkeepers, Yazid Abdullah, Nawar Bain Atai, and Abdallah Al-Fawouri. Your defenders are going to be Muhammad Abu Hassan, Abdullah Nasib, Hussam Abu Dabib, Yasan Al-Arab, Mo Adunli, Salim Obad, Salida Rozan, Ilsan Haddad, Asans Badwai. Your midfielders are going to be Amir Jamouis, Noor El-Rashwabi, Rajida Day, Ibrahim Syed, Monanid Abu Tai, Nizar Al-Radwan, Mohammed Al-Dazwan. Your forwards are going to be Mohammed Abdu Zarukur, Ali Owan, Musa Al-Tarami, Oded Al-Fakori, Mahmoud Al-Mahdi, and Ali Azaid. Now let's take a look at the projected 3-4-3 here. Like I said, managed by Jamal Salami. Abdullah will be your goalkeeper. Abdullani, Al-Arab, and Nasib will be your three center backs. Abu Taha, Jamus, Al-Radashan, and Haddad, your captain, will be your midfield four. And Al-Madri, Olawan, and Al-Tamari will be the front three here for Jordan. I can't say I watched their Cup performance in 2025. I can't say I watched their Asian Cup performance in 2023. There are going to be very few words here said about Jordan, except it's obviously a massive achievement qualifying for your first ever World Cup. It's going to be quite interesting to see how they play out on the international stage. I hope it goes well for them. It's always great to see a debutant do well in a tournament. I just feel like the cards are stacked against them in this group. It's going to be a very tough road for them to find their way out. It kind of feels like they're going to finish bottom. So like I said, that wraps up this group. Argentina are your runaway favorites. Second does seem wide open, although Austria does have the advantage here. I don't know much else about the other two teams, so I can't say whether or not it's going to be competitive for them. But this should be an interesting group to see how it plays out, just because how does Argentina fare coming into a World Cup where they are defending champions and not the chaser for the champion, they are the chasee. So with that is going to wrap it up for this penultimate World Cup preview. Tomorrow you will see Groups K and Groups L, which will wrap up the World Cup previews here on the Nick Burt Sports Network. So make sure you click like, make sure you click subscribe, tell anybody you know about it. We'll be back tomorrow, preview those. And then after that, I believe we will be doing the prediction show on Tuesday ahead of our first game on Thursday between Mexico and South Africa. Feels like it was just days ago I previewed those teams, and now here we are. The World Cup is right on our doorstep. Can you feel it in the air? I can. I'm hoping you can. So make sure you stay tuned here to the Nick Burt Sports Network. Thank you so much for watching. We will see you again very soon for another World Cup preview, the final World Cup preview before the official prediction show. So thank you so much for watching. Make sure you click like and subscribe to the Nick Bird Sports Network.